This is the captain of the Enterprise. Ship.
Podcasting, the final frontier. These are the ridiculous introductions I am forced to read at gunpoint, or should I say phaser point.
Ship.
Welcome to Ship, yet another in the long line of tedious Star Trek podcasts. This show is hosted by David Lawler and David B. Anderson. The two Davids will take you on a journey through time and space every 3 or 4 weeks, boldly podcasting where no podcast has gone before. Seriously? This is what you're making me read? Take it away, boys.
Welcome to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, and I am the Emperor Palpatine. I can't. I'm not going to be able to sustain that.
No!
Fascinating.
Ooh, in your anger. Captain James R. Kirk.
I'm losing command. I'm losing the Enterprise.
I mean Captain James T. Kirk. T for Tiberius. You're a Roman, Kirk, or you should have been. For some reason, his tombstone, the tombstone created by his former friend and all-knowing douchebag godbeast Gary Mitchell, carried his engraved names, James R. Kirk. What do you think his middle name was supposed to be?
Roddenberry.
That's very good. I that's not one of my suggestions.
I had a bad case of Roddenberries once. We got rid of those.
You know what causes that? It's like red dye poisoning in cereal. Richard, Robert, Ruttiger, Royce, Rodney,
Roy, Rutabaga.
Rutabaga. James Rutabaga Kirk, and everybody looks at him and goes, Rutabaga?
Coin a phrase. Fascinating.
Shut up, it's my name. So James T. Kirk is a man obsessed. He is driven, he is compelled, he is ambitious, he is adventurous, he is handsome. He has a great sense of humor. He's the perfect man on the bridge of his starship. Tonight we have 2 episodes devoted to Kirk's obsessive behavior. He isn't usually this driven, at least in a personal sense, in most other episodes, but these stand out in the conventional Kirk narrative because they deal with issues or incidents from his past.
Number 1 on our list of things to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes, we get little nuggets of information about the youthful James Kirk.
That reminds me of an episode that we already did where he was talking about, this was like in, I think like the first one, which was actually like the 4th one, where he talked about the Gary Mitchell guy how they like
douchebag godbeast, yes.
Yes, and they knew each other from before or something, and something happened then, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a little blonde lab technician.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but also I think there were these darts, these poison darts, and he said he took one for Kirk. Or something, and I guess
we had discussed whether that was the intern or something that was actually Carol Marcus or something.
Well, yeah, you were speculating on
might
the
have
idea.
been. I don't know if it times out. Everything the continuity gets a little weird.
Yeah, now that I look back on it, it's probably not the same chick because she wouldn't be a little blonde lab technician at that point. This woman invented the Genesis device. She was a genius back from Kirk's youth, so she wasn't an unpaid intern doing a bunch of. She was probably already high up there in the ranks.
Well, I know we don't talk about the blasphemous later movies, but Carol Marcus does come back in an
No, don't tell me that. Oh,
yeah.
Who plays her?
A British actress. And she has a British accent.
Oh, bloody hell. Is it the con? I didn't see the second.
Yeah, it's Into Darkness, yes.
Well, like in Shore Leave, there's an episode called Shore Leave where Kirk reminisces about a bully who tormented him, and in A Private Little War, from which we take our title for this episode, Kirk's Private Little Wars, in which he talks to Spock about a paradise he once knew. So Star Trek was originally meant to be about the adventures and exploits of this starship captain. He was to be the center of the drama and the hero of every episode. Gene Roddenberry referred to him as Horatio Hornblower in outer space.
This is the captain of the Enterprise speaking.
And that was Nicholas Meyer's take on it, too, for Star Trek 2. It didn't turn out that way. Spock became the breakout character. Leonard Nimoy became the star of the show. Right, and Shatner somewhat graciously took a backseat to Nimoy's newfound popularity.
It became less about Kirk and his story and more about the crew's story and the ship, and he was the captain, and but they never really got into his personal life except in the movies where it's almost like his story, his personal story kind of started. if you think about it.
Or in these two episodes that we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is Hank Hill from King of the Hill doing the intro of the press release for this episode. Go ahead. Take it away, Hank.
Well, thank you. The USS Enterprise provides passage for a stranded troupe of Shakespearean actors, one of whom plots the murder of Captain Kirk, William Shatner, in the conscience of the king. On the NBC television network Colorcast of Star Trek on December 8th, although Kirk suspects actor Anton Caridian, Arnold Moss, is actually a former notorious rebel leader long sought by authorities but now believed dead, there is insufficient proof to make an arrest. Meanwhile, Caridian's beautiful actress doctor, Lenore Barbara Anderson, offers a special performance of Hamlet aboard the ship as an expression of gratitude for being rescued. Kirk agrees, unaware he is setting the stage for a tragedy not in the script.
Thank you. Except you said beautiful actress doctor. Didn't know her.
Whatever.
All right, Barry Trivers, with uncredited assists from Gene Kuhn, concocts an interesting revenge fantasy, perhaps amused at the idea of a mass-murdering despot masquerading as a Shakespearean actor. And in the space of 20 years, from 1931 to 1951, he wrote screenplays for 40 movies. He also wrote for television series, including Have Gun Will Travel, where he met Roddenberry, and Combat. Trivers, along with Adrian Spies, Harlan Ellison, Richard Matheson, Ted Sturgeon, and other notable writers were pursued by Roddenberry when he was developing and pitching his idea for Star Trek. This was one of those things where Roddenberry really wanted to court top-notch science fiction writers to get his show off the ground, because a lot of other science fiction shows from that time and before didn't really do that. So this was what he was doing. He was, his script, Trivers' script for The Conscience of the King was one of the few not originated or pitched by Roddenberry. So, but my main problem with it is that Trivers doesn't seem to know much about the Enterprise, the Starship, or its crew.
Well, see, that's why I kind of liked this episode. It was almost like its own thing, and I also liked that, like, okay, it starts off very Shakespearean to begin with.
Yes, with the knife.
And I thought,
somebody gets stabbed and somebody goes, dope!
Yeah. And I thought, this is the only way you can make Shatner look subdued, is to have somebody be even more Shakespearean.
That's right. As a matter of fact, that's an isolated sound clip that we use at the end of every episode of this show. We have, at the end, when we're done and we say our goodbyes, right before we say goodbye, we have Caridian going, I am tired. But you're right about it, and I think what it is Shatner. This is like Shatner's wheelhouse, this script, because it's all Shakespearean. It's even the performances are Shakespeareran, and it's a Shakespearean story in a way, right?
Yeah. And we're still early in the show, so his hair it varies in quality, but it's better. It's better than because we'll talk about another episode.
This is Shatner's hair alert, brought to you by
It's a Shatner, yes.
Just for men.
Just for men.
So let's get into the story a little bit first before we go into our random observations, right?
Yeah.
So they're there. They're watching. What are they watching? Macbeth. They're watching a
Macbeth,
play, a stage version of the Scottish play. Sorry, we're all gonna die now because I just said Macbeth. Oh, I did it again. That's double death. Yeah. Double death on you, dumbass. They're watching a play, and it's interesting that it's fun that Shakespeare manages to survive into the 23rd century.
Although I will say, like, when they're watching on the stage and everything, you can really see the low budget of the show. It's like it's the low budget of Star Trek, and it's the low budget of this particular Shakespearean production. It looks very...
It's minimalist. It has a black box.
It's very minimal.
It's
kind of like a bad. It's like a bad porn set almost.
Kirk is visiting his friend Thomas Layton, and they were involved in something really horrible that happened 20 years ago, some kind of a mass extermination. And his friend is saying, that guy is Kodos. I know it, because he's been to this play a few hundred times. So he's looking at this guy and he's like, it's like, if you were involved in some tragedy 20 years ago and you're a big fan of Rocky Horror and you watch Tim Curry one more time and you just say, I know that's the guy who killed my parents.
That guy has like this weird eye patch half face thing. And,
yeah. We'll get into that in a second. That's one of my major hang-ups with the episode, but
Like, it's
he's
funny, like,
revealed.
the stuff that you like is the stuff that you don't like is the stuff that I'm liking it for.
You like that? That's so,
I kind of did. I'm like, this is
for what
so,
it is. It's very schlocky.
It's schlocky, but it's a Shakespeare. It's like, almost like it's. They talk about Shakespeare. It's almost like a Shakespearean episode of Star Trek. It's like Star Trek meets Shakespeare.
Yes, it is, and it's done, and it's even performed and shot in such a way, and the music, all combining together to form this Shakespearean thing. It's very well made that way.
Yeah.
Kirk finally gets it into his head after a few unfortunate incidents that there's something screwy with this guy, this old guy, and his traveling company of actors, who I guess go perform Shakespeare all over the galaxy, as it were.
Kodos the Executioner. Summary. Governor of Tarsus IV, 20 Earth years ago, invoked martial law, slaughtered 50% of population Earth colony that planet. Burned body found when Earth forces arrived. No positive identification. Case closed.
Information on Anton Caridian.
Director and star of traveling company of actors, sponsored by Galactic Cultural Exchange Project. Touring official installations last 9 years. Has daughter Lenore, 19 years old, traveling with...
Give comparative identification between actor Caridian and Governor Kodos.
No identification records available on actor Anton Caridian.
So he brings him aboard the ship while he's trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, Spock is getting a clue, getting information. So is McCoy. They're conferring about this. Kirk's losing it. He starts to lose it with them, and it's interesting in that way. But we eventually get to our conclusion, and it turns out everybody's fears were justified. Now, I've known many actors over the years, and yes, many of them can be flighty weirdos, but Lenore takes the cake. She's a beautiful blonde with glowing psychotic green eyes and perfect teeth, which was a rarity for actors of the time because I did a Twilighty show about that Zone episode with my friend Eve Kerrigan, and she's obsessed with actors' teeth, and she noticed that, actors back then, for the most part, I mean, a lot of them are very beautiful like this woman is, but actors back then did not have the greatest teeth. This woman has beautiful teeth. And so now I'm obsessed with perfect teeth. Because I don't have perfect teeth myself. If you saw my teeth, you'd be like, "Oh my God."
I have. What happens is like
you have a winning smile, David.
I have a winning smile, but what the thing is, it's a combination of very lucky. Like I didn't have braces, and they just came out pretty straight. But then like years of neglect of like cracked teeth, had to have a tooth pulled, had to have.
I hate dentists. I really do.
I'm not even going to call it a cap, but like an enamel thing that was then buffed down to like cover something, So I probably need some.
You're actually a vampire, aren't you? You have to file them down.
That's why I don't age. That's why I don't age.
There you go. Now, this is the first time we're going to talk about the character of Kevin Thomas Riley. But he does make his premiere in a few episodes before that called The Naked Time. And I'm assuming he's roughly 10 years younger than Kirk's stated age of 34. Shatner was 35 at the time of shooting, and Bruce Hyde, the actor who plays Kevin Thomas Riley, was 25 at the time of shooting. So since the days of Kodos the Executioner, roughly 20 years before, this would place Riley's age at 4 and Kirk at 14.
Yeah,
which Leighton must have been a childhood friend, right?
They don't explain like. Did they explain why Kirk was there and how he witnessed it? I mean, did he grow up on a colony? Did he I don't exactly know. Did they explain that?
It's unusual because I have a lot of like books, fan books about Kirk or about Star Trek, and they try to put together some kind of a chronological, some kind of a timeline about Kirk's history. And they have him growing up on Earth. Remember in Star Trek he says he's from Iowa. He only works in outer space. But then here he's 14, but he's on an Earth colony. So maybe it's possible that he's kind of like an army brat, and he was just moving from place to place.
Maybe, I don't know.
And did they say anything in the episode about his family being killed? I mean, Riley says his family was killed.
They just put him there, but they didn't say because honestly, Kirk
maybe he was living with Tom Leighton.
Kirk might have been a little more obsessed if his whole family had been wiped out. Like that could have really informed his character, and he was the man responsible.
If we must get psychological, maybe he felt powerless as a child, but now as a starship commander, he has a sense of power about him and a sense of right and wrong. And he often says that the Enterprise is like the police of the galaxy in a way, policing policing the galaxy, as it were. Maybe he feels that now that he has that power, he might as well take some action, finally, because this is like one thing that always bugged him. Maybe something along those lines.
And then when he gets like really old, you know, with the Klingons, he's like, let them die.
Yeah, that's bitter old. That's
bitter old Kirk. Yeah.
So Riley's character here is kind of haphazard. I think they really needed an extra body in the storyline to become like a kind of reflection of Kirk, like a younger Kirk. So he actually grabs a gun and he's gonna try and exact his own final justice before Kirk eventually talks him out of it. But his first appearance on the show was The Naked Time. We haven't talked about this episode yet. I don't know when we're going to talk about it. But in that episode, he becomes inebriated by this weird virus that makes everybody drunk. He takes over the ship and turns off the engines. He barricades the door so nobody can get into engineering, and he sings Irish drinking songs and demands that the women in the crew use less makeup and that they should wear their hair more loosely about their shoulders. Mm-hmm. But then the next time we see him, Kirk basically... Both Kirk and Spock use the computer, and they say, who are the last living people to have seen Kodos? Kirk is one of them. Riley is the other one. So Kirk wants to put Riley out of danger, so he puts him down in engineering. And unfortunately, that doesn't really work well. In fact, it kind of draws the killer out a little more, because the killer tries to poison him while Riley is listening to Uhura sing Beyond Antares. She finishes her song. She's like, how'd you like that, Riley? And he goes, help me, please. I mean, that's really not a ringing endorsement of Uhura's singing. No. But so let's talk about Thomas Layton for a minute. What the hell happened to his face? Mm-hmm. You would think in the 23rd century, there would be some incredible leaps forward in plastic surgery and facial reconstruction. But instead, Layton is wearing this mask covering up the damage to his face, I guess. Half of his face. I wonder how his wife felt about that. That poor woman.
Well, yeah, I mean, but again, I thought it made it kind of cool, like when he kind of like turned around for dramatic effect, like because at first you don't really see it. It almost looks like he's just wearing an eye patch, and then he turns around and it's like, look what he did to me. Yeah. It kind of reminds me.
I love how Kirk and his wife are nonplussed by that too.
It kind of reminds me. There was this movie. I'm gonna go sidetrack here for a second. There was a movie called Eliminators. It was a Charles Band production. It was the one where they had Mandroid, and they had it actually had Denise Crosby in it, actually, from
Denise Crosby
from Next Generation.
Lieutenant Yar, yes.
Yeah, and anyway, there was this guy, and he has like this guy's working with him. He says, "Why don't you show some mercy?" And then he turns around and he goes, "Was any mercy shown to me?" And his
dun dun,
and then but literally like lightning. And half his face is all messed up.
I was going to sidetrack on a movie, but I was going to sidetrack on The Man Without a Face with Mel Gibson.
Yeah, the movie he directed. That's actually a good movie, but
it's a great movie. I love that movie, actually. It made me cry. But yeah, he says, I remember what he did, that bloody thing.
Illogical. Please explain.
Bum bum. Meanwhile, Kirk and the wife are just like, okay, whatever. He's pissed off. So the backstory is that an Earth colony on the planet Tarsus 4 was suffering from a food shortage caused by a fungus or something, and a fungus among us. And the governor, our friend Kodos, reasoned that there was only enough food for half the population, so he destroyed the other half, which seems a bit over the top. Now, I know politicians don't practice subtlety as a rule, but perhaps he reasoned one half of the population was a basket of deplorables. Well, when he could have just built a wall to keep the other half out and make them pay for it.
You know, in defense of genocide, I think that if you're on a planet and you think you're trapped. Now they thought they were trapped on the planet for a long time and with the resources, and he was probably already on edge. And in any large group of people, you can kind of spot out the people you're like, I don't like the look of that guy. He looks weak. He looks old. He looks stupid. You can. It makes it easier when you're in a dire situation of just cut him, cut her.
I don't like his face. She was rude to me once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's
this one voted for the other guy.
But this is all under the auspices of we're going to be trapped here forever. We got to make these tough decisions. You got to make those tough decisions. I'm sure.
Okay.
in desperate times call for desperate measures. I think actually somebody says that in this episode.
I think he was. It's weird. They're having a conversation and they yell, and it's obvious this guy's so guilty. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
He's like, if the supply ships had arrived in time, this CODIS of yours would have been a hero.
Yeah.
Which is from what I understand, according to I guess Spock's story when he's informing McCoy of this, they weren't really that late. They could have gone without for a couple of days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than wiping out an entire population. As a leader, I'm a leader, you're a leader. We're both leaders. We will say, okay, let's just play it out. Let's just play it through and see what happens. Let's try not to do anything crazy here.
Or do you like they do in those movies where the whole bunch of people are trapped on the boat? You just start waiting for people to die, and then you eat the people.
Yes, why not? Yes. Also, just suspended animation. We could put everybody in suspended animation, like the show Wayward Pines.
I was thinking that probably takes up too much energy because that's energy that needs to be produced that you need to conserve,
Or how about alternative food sources like macaroni and cheese and kale? Is there anything wrong with that?
I could certainly live on macaroni and cheese. I don't know about kale, but...
Okay, so Leighton is discovered dead, which is strange, shouldn't happen. Kirk still isn't convinced that this guy Caridian is guilty. So he arranges some subterfuge. He calls in a favor, gets the Caridian company of players to hitch a ride with the Enterprise. He starts romancing Lenore, of course, like he does. This is probably one of those first, maybe in the chronology, it's one of the first times where Kirk is actually aggressive. But he's really kind of using this poor girl in a way. Right?
He's trying to get information. He's trying to get influence. He's trying to figure things out, and he figures, well, I'll get laid while I'm at it.
He's like, well, yeah, and then he spouts off some really horrible poetry to her.
It always works.
He says, what does he say? He says, stars may change, galaxies may disintegrate, but a woman always remains a woman.
I mean, he might as well have gotten a guitar out and put a ponytail on or something.
Also, I hate to say it, but I really feel like Lenore is not Kirk's speed. I think that she's way smarter than she lets on. I mean, she'd have to be in order to, spoiler alert, be revealed as the killer later on. She stayed one step ahead of all these people.
She keeps it together, but then her crazy
in the 23rd century. Yeah.
Her crazy comes out at the end. She can't keep it together.
Yeah. But staying ahead of criminal detection in the 23rd century.
I mean, this is on the level of those guys in Star Trek 6 with the boots and then
with the gravity boots. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of this activity arouses Spock's curiosity, so he starts snooping, and he has every right to. This pisses off Kirk, who tells him to mind his own business. McCoy even backs up Spock, which is awesome and unusual too, because you don't really see that.
No, but
much.
was this kind of an earlier one where they're like arguments?
Well, do you remember? There's a scene where Spock is like, "I'm trying to figure out this mystery," and McCoy's like, "Have a drink," and he says, "Vulcans don't drink." And he says, well, now I know why you were conquered, or some kind of bullshit like that. If I were Spock, I would have smacked him over the other side of the table. But they have to work together.
He's not going to smack him.
Yeah, Vulcans don't smack people. They only do when they're horny.
Yeah.
So, McCoy backs him up, and then Spock returns the favor. In the next episode, we're going to talk about obsession. But where does Kirk come off with this attitude? I mean, the Enterprise doesn't have time for personal vengeance. What do you think about that, David?
They always have time for personal vengeance.
Right. Is that it? Is that your $5,000
That's
answer?
my thought.
Okay.
My report on Lieutenant Riley.
What do you make it?
He's got a good check.
And we predict the same for you, Captain.
All right, Mr. Spock, let's have it.
Lieutenant Riley was a witness. So were you.
All right.
Someone tried to kill him.
Could have been an accident.
You should be told the difference between empiricism and stubbornness, Doctor. I checked with the library computer, just as you did. I got the same information.
Aren't you getting a little out of line, Mr. Spock? My personal business.
It's my personal business when it might interfere with the smooth operation of this ship.
You think that happened?
It could happen.
I don't like anyone meddling in my private affairs, not even my second in command.
Jim, Spock's simply trying to...
I know what he's trying to do, and I don't like it.
It's his job, and you know it.
So Gert Oswald directed this episode. It's appropriately stagey and Shakespearean, also with your porno set, as you mentioned earlier. And it reminds me of the stark contrast between actors like Nimoy and Shatner. I mentioned this before, that Nimoy was more method. He would often talk about finding an emotional center to play a character that was essentially emotionless, as opposed to Shatner's bravado, center stage performance rooted in Shakespeare. And method and Shakespearean acting would intersect more in the early 70s with actors like Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman or Harvey Keitel, summoning Stella Adler to conjure up Shakespeare. And Arnold Moss is really good in this episode. He eats this part up with a knife and fork, and he looks like he's more in command of the drama than he was in a Monkeys episode he shot a year later that my wife recently reviewed. Moss and Shatner play off each other brilliantly.
Are you sure you didn't act this role out in front of a captive audience whom you blasted out of existence without mercy?
I find your use of the word mercy strangely inappropriate, Captain. Here you stand, the perfect symbol of our technical society. Mechanized, electronicized, and not very human. You've done away with humanity, the striving of man to achieve greatness through his own resources.
We've armed man with tools. The striving for greatness continues. But Kodos...
Kodos, whoever he was...
Or is.
Kodos made a decision of life and death. Some had to die that others might live. You're a man of decision, Captain. You ought to understand that.
All I understand is that 4,000 people were needlessly butchered.
In order to save 4,000 others. And if the supply ships hadn't come earlier than expected, this Kodos of yours might have gone down in history as a great hero.
But he didn't.
Yeah, and I noticed that, like, you don't really know, at least as the audience, if he did it or if he was the guy up until pretty much the end.
Well, don't they do a kind of a computerized waveform thing where they analyze
but he still says, I'm still not convinced.
I must be absolutely sure.
Yeah, and for a while I was thinking this could be an interesting thing where he's such a good actor and he wants to be such a good actor that he's going to act his way into them thinking it was him. You know what? Like you know what I mean? Like he wants people to think he's such a good actor that he was able to fake the voice enough. Like he took the hit. I realized like this has got a little bit of like Summersby in there, you know, a little bit of
Summersby.
Remember
that's
that
a
movie?
Nicholas Meyer movie.
That's a Nicholas Meyer movie where
he wrote
the guy was so good at spoiler alert, but the guy was so good at pretending to be somebody else. The only one he couldn't convince was the wife.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't that Summersby was a remake of another movie, right?
Return of Martin Gere or Return of Richard Gere.
Return of Gere. Jets. I want to fly jets. My grandmother wants to fly jets. Anyway.
But
sorry, I wrote up a review for Vintage Cable Box of An Officer and a Gentleman, and that's in my head right now.
Lift
us up where we belong.
That's a good movie, by the way.
Where the eagles fly on a mountain high. All right, I got nowhere else to go. Anyway,
but so I just thought that like because of that, it was like, is he gonna Summersby himself and get executed just to keep the part going, just to keep the lie going? And I'm like, that could be an interesting, but they didn't. He ended up like admitting that that it was him, and he also wanted to die because he wanted to end his guilt.
Do you think you think he really wanted to end his guilt on that?
Because he says it. He says it at the very end to Kirk, and he basically says, "It's been 20 years. I can't take it anymore. Just do it."
Okay, let me see if I can go access that bit at the end, because I know Riley shows up with the gun while they're performing. Yeah. Kirk's like, "Put the gun down. You don't want to throw your life on a mistake," and so he does, and he goes and he tells him to get lost. And then I guess Kirk overhears okay, you got it partly right, I think, David. But what happens is I think Kirk overhears an argument between Lenore and Anton Caridian, right?
Yeah.
And she says, "I've saved you. I've killed them all." And
I was the one, and
he's like, "What are you saying? Yeah. All 7 more blood on my hands."
Yeah, exactly. He said,
"No, they're not on your hands anymore,
it was like,
Father."
She was almost like his redemption. Like she was the one. She kind of like he thought that she was like his, like he did a whole bunch of horrible things, but she was like the one good thing.
Yeah, and it turns she was.
And it was like a betrayal. It was a
of
betrayal of everything, and then he's like,
she turns out to be his Huckleberry there.
Yeah,
and then she goes completely psycho.
Yeah.
He's like, put the gun down. You'll never get off this ship or whatever. And she's like, it'll become a floating tomb. And then we cut to her close up of her gorgeous eyes, right? And she's completely gone.
You know, I thought she was gonna, because they did this in a thing before where a phaser.
And it's okay. One more thing.
A phaser was, yes.
Before you say that, just the ending right there with the phaser and everything is total Shakespeare. Go ahead.
It is. Okay. What I thought they were going to do was, in an earlier scene, she has like, and we find out it was her who did it, but there's a phaser that's like slowly going, like it's like
yeah. It's what do they call it?
It's put away.
It's on overload. It's
on overload, and
great scene too, by the way.
Yeah, and it's much like, again, they got to keep checking. They got to check those vents because he put it up in the vent. I'm like, that's where those shoes were in Star Trek 6.
Yes.
Get them out of there. Check those vents.
Great music too. I'll never forget that scene because that music is awesome. It's like dun, 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 dun. And it's like, get out of here.
And then he throws it down. It looked like he just threw it in the trash or something.
Or like a garbage dump, or I don't know.
I think it's like it would have been great because this has the one I watched. It had better special effects, and I would have thought this would have been the perfect time to add like it being shot out into space or something. Yeah,
and have like a phaser just explode. But yeah, I guess they didn't want to do that. That would have been too much. The fans would have been like, "How dare you!
How dare you make more sense of the plot?"
Because the actors had to mimic the explosion, so they had to go.
Yeah,
and they had to move
around. Hard to starboard. Hard to port. Hard to start.
Frankly, Captain, I'm exhausted.
But again, at the end, I thought she was going to like turn it on and have it overload, and then it could blow up the whole ship.
Well, she went. I don't know why they decide to lunge at her or something. So she kills her father. I don't think she meant to kill her father.
Do you think maybe he intended to jump in front of it because he wanted his pain to be over? Because he'd already been betrayed. He'd already been.
That's
betrayed.
That's a very interesting point.
Which makes it even more Shakespearean when you think
self-sacrifice in a way.
Yeah.
He kills himself.
Like double Shakespearean.
But then she fucking loses it. She completely goes, father, father.
Yeah.
Oh, proud dead. And then what does she say? Oh, proud dead. Oh God, I got to look it up. Sorry. Because I want to do the voice. You're always doing the voice. I want to do a voice.
Well, I'm assuming.
Oh, proud dead. Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And what is it from? Is it from Hamlet?
Well, they were doing Hamlet. That could.
Oh yeah. Okay. This is it. It's Hamlet. Where is it? Oh, proud dead. Oh, proud dead. Blah blah blah.
Was this in the Mel Gibson Hamlet?
I don't know how.
Where he had half a face.
Where he had half a face.
I'm combining his movies in.
Proud. Oh, proud death, what feast is toward in thine eternal cell, that thou so many princes at the shot so bloodily hast struck? And then she goes, the curtain rises. Now is no time to sleep. And then she says, the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king.
Oh, fishy, 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 fish.
It reminds me of, Scrooged. Remember the Scrooged movie with Bill Murray and Michael J. Pollard, who's in an episode of Star Trek later that we'll talk about. But they're convinced he plays like a wino, and he's convinced that Bill Murray is Richard Burton. He says, do that thing from Shakespeare. And so Bill Murray just kind of bluffs his way through Shakespeare. He goes, I forswear to be the forsworn of the forswear. And they're like, brilliant, brilliant. And they clap, and it's just ridiculous. Anyway, but this is a great episode for me in that way, other than some of the conceits of the future and criminal detection, waveforms, and Thomas Layton's crazy face. I like it mainly because this is one of the first episodes of Star Trek to demonstrate my absolute favorite element of the show, which is the Holy Trinity, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Their relationship and their dynamic. What do you think?
I think I agree. They each get a moment. I would say Kirk gets the most moments, of course, because it's his show.
It's his show, yeah.
But it's like they always but then they cut to the two sides of the argument. Or it's not really even the two sides of the argument, because Kirk has his side, and then Spock and McCoy are like the other side of that argument. They kind of like add together.
It makes so much sense to me. It's so wonderful,
they come at it from different angles, but they both kind of agree.
And McCoy gets a great Shakespearean reference in there. He says, "What do you do when you decide he is Caridian? Do you play God and carry his head through the corridors in triumph? It's a great line. I love that line.
Mm-hmm.
Anything more that you wanted to say
about this particular episode?
Yeah.
I actually really liked it because it was Star Trek, but it was more character Star Trek. It was like you said, it was the Holy Trinity, but then they also threw in the Shakespeare, and again, it was the only thing that can make Shatner's overacting look tame by comparison is just getting a bunch of Shakespearean actors coming in and being even more Shakespearean and being even more crazy. And I thought that it created a good balance of what was going on. And also I just realized when they showed, he was comparing the pictures of like when he was trying to like cross-reference different, like the commander that he was with the actor that he is now.
Yeah.
I could swear they took a picture of two different actors. Like,
they didn't look quite alike.
Just to confuse you. I could be wrong because they look different. They look different enough in those pictures. I'm like, it could be somebody.
I think you're right. I think it was deliberate. I think it was deliberate so that you keep the audience a little bit off balance, and that helps follow the story. It follows the narrative that way.
I had so many twists and turns I didn't know until the end, and I like that. I like being surprised in a story. And since I haven't seen half of these episodes in their entirety, it's like it's a new discovery for me.
Did you? Okay, one question then.
Yeah.
Did you see Lenore being the bad guy in the end?
I did not.
Okay, well, I
think
have to agree.
And I think it has something to do with the way she looks. You get kind of like she has a certain sort of haunting appearance.
She does. Yeah.
So you get distracted by that, and you're like, oh, okay, Kirk's gonna bed her.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, Lenore, I'm a starship captain. This is all mine.
Yes.
Yes, you are. She's not a bad actress either.
No,
she's a looker too. She's a looker and a good actress.
Well, she overdoes it with this, but that's because you're supposed to with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we move forward to December 15th, 1967 for the 47th episode of Star Trek in regular production, Obsession, from the second season. Background on it was over dinner with writer Art Wallace, Gene Roddenberry mused about doing a Moby Dick version of a Star Trek episode. Wallace built a story outline, got it approved quickly, not only because he was a close friend of Roddenberry's, but he was also working on Roddenberry's Gary 7 pilot, which would become Assignment Earth and close out the second season.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Star Trek First Contact, really. It's like somebody has experienced something with an alien life form and only he understands a little bit, because that was kind of like with the Picard story anyway in that movie.
Yeah, you broke your wooden ships.
Yeah.
Blow up the damn ship, John Luke! No! You don't understand. Yeah. They destroy whole galaxies and we fall back. They destroy Earth and we fall back. The line must be drawn here! This far, no further!
Yeah.
That's, sorry.
You get to do your voice tonight.
I guess I did. My Jean-Luc Picard.
Oh, yes.
I said, wow.
Engage.
All right, for this press release of the episode Obsession, we welcome Eric Cartman, formerly of South Park, Colorado. Eric,
okay.
And take it away.
Okay. Captain Kirk's career and the safety of the Enterprise are jeopardized by his compulsion to destroy a cloud-like creature which previously killed some of the crew. In Obsession, the NBC television network Star Trek's telecast Friday, December 15th. While prospecting for a rare earth, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, recognizes an odor which reminds him of an incident 12 years before. At the time, his captain and 20 crew members were killed by a gaseous mass. Kirk dispatches Ensign Rizzo, probably in Italian, Jerry Ayres, to destroy the cloud. Rizzo lives just long enough to confirm Kirk's suspicions. Galverick, probably a G, guest stars as Keaton Brooke. Rizzo's replacement is the son of the captain killed in the first accident. He too is almost killed when the cloud invades the Enterprise. Kirk then uses human bait against the creature. Yeah, I think that came up pretty good. Beefcake!
Thank you, Eric.
You are now listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. boldly podcasting where no podcast has... I'm not reading this. I'm not. Where's my coat? I'm getting out of here. I hate it here.
Ship.
This is unusual because we have a guest star playing a subordinate. And it doesn't happen often as it seems. Ensign Garovic is a red shirt who doesn't die, though more than a few buy the farm in this episode. This is one of those episodes that probably inspires that whole meme about red shirts. You know, there's a bit in the episode where Uhura announces that Rizzo has died, and Kirk notices the sullen Garovic and appeals to his inner sense of macho.
Beefcake!
He says, "You'll get a crack at what killed him. Interested?" And he goes, "Yes, I am, sir." And then Kirk, of course, says, "Respect my authority."
You will respect my authority.
I just got to say that my wife does a really good Cartman, too. But she does it by accident. She just winds up sounding like Cartman.
She gets so angry that she...
She goes, "I'm going to kick you in the nuts." And I'm like...
going to kick you in the nuts.
And she sounds just like Cartman. So we... Kitty's being a dildo. We pick up...
Kitty's being a dildo.
9 years after the events of Tarsus 4, it just seems tragedy follows little Jimmy Kirk around everywhere he goes, doesn't it?
Well, also the smoke approaches, and then somehow they're able to rewind the film in a comedic way. I thought, like, oh no.
Well, did you watch the remastered version?
Yeah, I watched the remastered version. They
still did that.
The smoke went, and then when he's like,
and it goes behind
and then it goes right back. Yeah, they just reversed the film. Like, that was
the practical effect of this gas creature, was just a smoke machine or a dry ice machine or something.
Which reminded me of, I don't know how many episodes of Lost you've seen, but it just reminded me of the smoke monster from Lost.
Oh, the smoke monster, yeah. With that guy, the Give Us Free guy from Amistad.
Give us free!
Give us free!
No, that was a different guy. That was Mr. Echo.
Give us free!
Mr. Echo, but he gets killed by the smoke monster, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's killed by the... Yeah, but that's not Give Us Free.
Give us free!
That's not Give Us Free?
Give Us Free.
Oh, wait, no. Oh, yeah. Give Us Free is the other guy from Wayward Pines.
Hinsu. He's Jimon Hinsu.
Jumanji, yes.
Jumanji, yes.
Boom, 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 boom. Anyway, so he, around the time he was on the Farragut serving under Garovic's dad, coincidentally, it's weird how everybody connects in this episode. He's like this lowly piece of crap ensign, but everybody dies except him once again. But this time, it's a vampire cloud that sucks you blah.
Yeah, and it has an odor.
It has. Did you catch an odor? A sickly sweet odor like honey. Kirk goes nuts in this episode, but it's very much a personal odyssey. He has a lot of pain to work through. McCoy tries his best to reach Kirk, but Kirk is hell-bent on destroying this strange creature, even at the cost of his ship. Now, what happens here is that they're there on some kind of a mining thing. They're looking for a mineral, some kind of an ore, and they phaser off a specimen, which just conveniently just sort of pokes itself out of the wall of the mountain or something. Yeah. And Spock picks it up with salad shears or salad tongs.
Yeah, what I noticed that was another thing I noticed, the cheapness of the show we were talking about with the Shakespeare. He picks it up like it's a piece of rock, but it literally is like a piece of styrofoam.
Yeah, it's
on the tongs that he's holding, it literally goes. It like kind of falls a little.
It flips a little, but they're trying their damnedest to sell this thing, just like a futuristic tongs.
Yeah.
You smell that? A sweet odor like honey. It was years ago, on another planet. A thing with an odor like that.
We're in the growing season in this hemisphere of this planet, Captain. There are doubtless many pollen aromas.
Rizzo.
Yes, sir.
Take your men. Make a swing around our perimeter. Scan for dichloronium in the atmosphere. Set your phasers on Disruptor B. If you see any gaseous cloud, fire immediately. You're on red alert. Make a swing.
And then Kirk catches the odor, and he's like, "Security, get security over here."
Catches the odor.
He gets security over. He says, "Rizzo, scan for dichloronium. Did you catch an odor? Catch an odor." And Spock's
Ooh, that smell.
So he's like, okay. So they go out there. They're like, what the hell is this? Well, I seem to get taken around, but there's something here. And then all of a sudden we see the smoke, and it kills everybody. It kills everybody, and it brings Rizzo is near death. So they take the bodies back. They take Rizzo back. They find that every red corpuscle in his veins is gone practically. And they're running out of blood, apparently, for this. For some reason, you would think that a starship would have a lot of blood. Or donors.
You're right.
Donors too, right? 430 people on the ship, and
aren't they on their way to some sort of thing? Like, cause they're supposed to drop off something.
Yeah, they have to deliver medicine. They have to deliver medicine, so they would probably have an extended medical crew aboard anyway, to do whatever they're doing. But never mind. We're not supposed to think about that.
Damn it, Jim! I'm a doctor, not a. Oh, okay.
Because I'm a doctor. That's how I know.
This is the captain. Can you hear me? Do you remember what happened to you?
Remember? I'm cold. I'm so cold.
You were attacked by something. When that happened, did you notice an odor of any kind? Rizzo. Rizzo, do you remember? A sickly sweet odor. Did you smell it?
Yes. A smell. Strange smell. It was like being smothered in honey.
Did you feel a presence, an intelligence?
It was trying to draw strength from us. I felt it. It was there.
He's beginning to sleep again, Jim. I can't risk another shot.
So they get up there, and then he starts espousing his ideas about things that happened in the past. He is introduced to Garavic's kid. And how convenient is that, by the way, that his kid is on the ship as he's undergoing this personal kind of psychotic episode involving this gaseous cloud. Kirk insists that McCoy look at these files on the creature, which inadvertently tells the story of a young, ambitious ensign, or Lieutenant Kirk, I'm not really sure, and his loyalty to his first captain, aforementioned Garavic, and apparently he sees a lot of himself in Garavic's kid. If I were a paranoid lunatic, I would suspect either collusion or intelligence Kirk keeps insisting on he can sense in the creature.
Mm-hmm.
So Kirk, as a result, does come over like a paranoid nut.
Mind your own business, Mr. Spock. I'm sick of your half-breed interference. Do you hear?
If there's intelligence, then there's purpose. So Spock explains that the creature is intelligent. It's a monster. It made decisive moves in an attack on the Enterprise. So what are we looking at here? Are we looking at Kirk and his vindication or his redemption? Or is this just another simple monster in space kind of a story?
I think it's both. And I think he's trying to sort of, because they kind of get to it later in the episode, that he is somewhat redeemed in his original guilt about hesitating, because he hesitated, but it wouldn't have mattered.
But at the cost of so many lives, so many red shirts give their lives. Why am I'm sounding like Kirk?
Why am I talking like this? My hair has gotten worse.
Oh, yeah. You have another Shatner hair update for us?
Yeah, Shatner hair update. His hair is... We're getting to season 2 where it's obviously a wig, where they're not even trying to sort of put it in his hair, like what he has left of his hair. It's like all a wig. And especially the front part looks very wig-like.
Okay. It's funny how I don't notice these things.
I just, when you're bald, you notice these.
Okay, when I've seen these episodes so many times, I never really thought about it. The only time I ever thought that his hair looked different was in the 3rd season.
Yeah, that's where he doesn't care, and then of course
or the way they're combing it. They're sort of in the 3rd season. They're combing his hair a little bit up.
Yeah,
it's a little bit up.
It might literally be the same hairpiece. They're just trying to style it differently. and that's why it looks different. But I think the color, it gets a little darker in the third season too. At least the one I watched, the ones we watched before, it just gets a little darker. And then of course he goes completely brown later in the mid 70s. Then he's in full Shatner toupee, and it's like really bad. And then, I mean, like if you see, like in Star Trek,
the T.J. Hooker years,
the
right?
T.J. Hooker years are better than if you go like mid 70s, say Kingdom of the Spiders, Star Trek the Motion Picture. That's just like they just put a rug on his head and it looks bad. But then when you get into the T.J. Hooker, Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, Star Trek 4 years, it's a much better piece. At least it's convincing enough that you don't really think about it. It's kind of got like a curl to it.
Well, I think whatever they did, like in the third season, because I remember there were wind machines and stuff like that, and I remember the hair moving naturally. I mean, it seemed to move naturally. There was one particular episode, The Empath, I think, where there's wind all about his face and it's blowing his hair.
Well, you know,
but it's like doing it in such a natural way. It looks gorgeous. Actually.
Well, when
I'm speechless.
In sort of the wig technology, you know, they can put little like wig glue kind of on there, and
must be some damn good glue.
Yeah, it is.
Like an epoxy.
It's like an epoxy. Yeah, it's like a medical. Maybe it's almost like crazy glue.
Here are some factoids for you. Did you know that William Shatner had a percentage of ownership in the show?
Wow.
It was part of his contract.
Well, he did have some juice at the time. I mean, he was one of those guys where he would always be like the star of a show that would last like 1 year or 2 years. He was kind of an up and comer at the time. So he had some. He was probably the most well-known actor of. He was probably at the level of a Jeffrey Hunter.
Well, yeah, Jeffrey Hunter
at the time
was. I remember reading in one of Shatner's books. I think it was Star Trek Memories. He said that Jeffrey Hunter was offered the show, but his wife was kind of like his agent. So his agent said, "All right, Jeffrey will do your show, but he wants full ownership of the show."
Yeah.
And they said no, they didn't want to do that. They went to Lloyd Bridges next. Lloyd Bridges also wanted ownership in the show. This was a standard thing for a lot of the lead actors of the time. Now I remember Don Adams saying that he was given two choices when he did Get Smart. They said, "We'll give you either this nice big fat salary, or we'll give you a smaller salary with an annuity ownership in the show." He took the smaller salary so that he could get payments every year.
Yeah.
So a lot of actors did that. Unfortunately, this doesn't really work out well for Shatner.
No.
Because in California, when his wife divorced him, she got the ownership of the show.
Yeah. And actually, if I remember correctly,
took everything, took all his money, his home.
The way that the way that the rules were then, you know, as they didn't really think about syndication at that time. Like shows would just be on. So whatever money was made was most of the money that was made by like the people that had the piece of the show was, you know,
I don't even think Roddenberry had a piece of the show.
It was mostly when it was on, and then it dissipated as it went into syndication because there wasn't a lot of episodes. There was like 60 some episodes that went into syndication.
Let me see, 70. I want to say 79.
Oh, 79. Okay, but still, the standard for syndication at the time was like 100. Or something.
Yeah, that was what
so that's why
that was their safety net. So 100 is a good round number.
So they didn't have a ton of it. So that's why when they would show it on TV, it would be a weekend thing. So they could, you know, it would be on. If it was 2, then they wouldn't have to recycle them for maybe like 9 months.
Yeah, and they did not. And NBC didn't always when they ran the show originally. They didn't always rerun every episode. Yeah. They only reran the ones they thought they could get higher ratings with.
So Shatner only got his money when he started doing the movies.
Yeah, at the time, yeah. That's why he was really destitute at the end of the series run. He was living out the back of a trailer. He always kept, you know, the great thing about Shatner was he always kept a tux, cleaned and pressed and ready to go because he would always get steady work showing up at awards shows and things like that.
Yeah.
So he always kept a clean and pressed tux. Another thing, now, Nimoy did not have ownership of the show. And from what I've read, he was a troublemaker. He argued constantly with the producers and writers. He demanded and received more money each season because he knew he was getting really popular as well because he got a lot of fan mail. So, but the producers, for the most part, maintained an alliance with Shatner because Shatner was not only the star of the show with the top billing, but he had the ownership as well. So they always wanted to make Shatner happy. And as a result, in his contract, he had to have the most lines. the most lines of dialogue. So this is why you always heard stories about Shatner reading the scripts and making sure he had enough lines or more lines than anyone else.
Well, you know, in Shatner's defense, you know, he's in the business of Shatner. Yes. Every actor is in the business of, they are their own product, and they should all work in their best interest to get the most time and the most money. It's your job. That's just anybody's job. And so for him to do that, and it's like, he's why you watch the show. Him and Nimoy and Spock. They're like you can't have Star Trek without Shatner or Kirk.
Let's talk a little bit about Nurse Christine Chapel, shall we? Played by Majel Barrett.
Yeah. That's another one that looked good at the time.
She looked okay.
That's an Amazonian goddess right there.
She's kind of tall with big hands, and she's got this matronly quality about her, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, in this episode, anyway. In this episode, she's very much like a Mary Worth character.
She was the wife of Gene Wright. She was pretty much, and she was the voice of the computer too.
Yeah, she was the voice of the computer. She was the voice of many different aliens on the show as well, and the voice of the computer in Next Generation, of course, and those iterations of later Star Trek shows.
The voice of the computer in when they spoiler alert in Star Trek 3 when they blew up the Enterprise.
Was she the voice? I don't know. I know she was in Star Trek 3. She had a brief. No, wait. Was she?
No, wait. That was Rand. That was Rand. Actually.
Rand. Yeah, that's right.
No, she was. I think she was.
Janice had a cameo in Star Trek 3.
Yeah.
Majel Barrett had a cameo in Star Trek. Well, she was the doctor until McCoy came in and said, "No woman is going to be a doctor on my ship."
Yeah.
In motion picture, and she was in Star Trek 4.
Yeah.
In the beginning. But in this episode, she's like interfering with everybody. You know, she's like doing this tough love number on Garavik and everything, you know, scamming him into eating his lunch. And she doesn't have the greatest bedside manner for a nurse. She reminds me of the nurses at the hospital where my wife was giving birth to our daughter. They were very mean, you know.
Sometimes they just have to get stuff done and get people in and get people out, so maybe that's why.
If I must dish, I want to dish a little bit about Majel Barrett. Now, Roddenberry, you know, and I know people don't like to hear it, he was a bit of a cad. He liked the ladies, and he was married to a woman, and then he had an affair with Majel Barrett, and then he had an affair with Nichelle Nichols while he was having an affair with Majel Barrett. This guy gets around.
Well, remember this was the 60s. Everybody was.
What's the 60s?
Stuff was going on.
Yeah, but I read so many other stories from people who worked on the show, and they were just too busy to do stuff like that. Like Gene Kuhn was a producer. He worked himself to death practically on that show. Robert Justman, the same. Roddenberry, I don't know where he found the time, but he managed to fit Nichelle Nichols under his desk. He managed to fit so many other people. I mean, like a lot of times, there's a book I was reading, and it was basically, you know, step into my office. It was a casting couch situation. How about taking your top off? You know, things like that. I mean, it's just, it's not something that you put together with the image of Roddenberry, because Roddenberry doesn't look like Robert Redford, you know? I mean, he just looks like a producer, writer.
He's a producer. He has money. That's all you need. So kids out there, make a ton of money, you'll get laid. That's how it works.
Or basically get on your knees and then you'll make a ton of money.
Yes. Go the other direction, yes.
Terrible. It's a terrible business.
Young women of America, you know what to do.
Young women of America, unite! I like my voice.
Yeah, so my advice to all the young women of America, less teeth.
Oh, God, that's terrible. I'm keeping that in. I'm totally keeping that in. So let's stop at the dishing now. Let's get on with the story. According to this, something happened to my voice. All right, so they come to the conclusion that the only way to destroy this thing... first, Spock and McCoy do an intervention on Kirk again, like they did in The Conscience of the King, right? And this time, Spock backs up McCoy. And this great music there, he comes in and he says, "I am preparing a medical log entry." And then you hear, dun-dun!
Oh, speaking of music, there was a part, when they were on the planet and he was detecting the odor. There was a musical riff that was reused by James Horner in Star Trek 3, almost in the same. They were both on a planet, and they were both something was happening on the planet. It's a little riff that goes. Yeah, and it's a.
We're doing it atonally here. It's probably terrible.
It's a small riff. Maybe you can actually play it when you play clips, but.
Well, Horner, talented musician, and rips off his own stuff.
He would rip off his own. I know he's stealer of his own stuff, but it was all good stuff. So
Krull, Wolfen, Aliens, Star Trek, it all just sounds the same. Anyway.
But yeah, I noticed that immediately because I've seen Star Trek 3. I've probably seen Star Trek 3 the most. It kind of comes to like when stuff was on cable, and it was on cable for so many times that I just like Star Trek 3 was always on and I was always watching it. And it's also a really good movie, so that helps.
Okay, so he does his medical log entry threat, and he says this requires a witness of command grade, and Spock comes in, and Spock gets all official on Kirk's ass, and he's like, we've noticed that your behavior's been screwy. We're going to do something about it if you don't tell us what's going on. And then that's how we get into this whole thing where Kirk is like, we have to destroy this thing. We have to destroy it.
I'd killed that thing if I had fired soon enough the first time.
You don't know that, Jim. You don't know that any more than you know that Garavic could have destroyed it.
I can't help how I feel. There's an intelligence about it, Bones. The malevolence, it's evil. It must be destroyed.
Don't be so obsessed.
Obsessed?
That you could destroy yourself, your career. A young boy who reminds you of yourself 11 years ago.
Don't push our friendship past the point where I have to take a vision.
Not, Jim. This is professional, Captain. I am preparing a medical log entry on my estimation of the physical and emotional condition of a starship captain. Which requires a witness of command grade.
Do I take it, Doctor? Commander? That both of you, or either of you, consider me unfit or incapacitated?
Correctly phrased, Captain, as recommended in the manual. Our reply, also as recommended, is, sir, we have noted in your recent behavior certain items which on the surface seem unusual. We respectfully ask permission to inquire further and...
Blessed, forget the manual. Ask your questions.
He gets obsessive about it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so they have a sit down, and they talk it through. And so they decide to go forward with this mission, and then they come up with the idea of using antimatter. The 23rd century equivalent of a nuclear explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And there is such a thing as antimatter, but our modern linguistics and the use of our language prohibits such an idea as antimatter. The definition of matter, I'm sorry, I had to do research, a physical substance in general, as distinct from mind and spirit, which is kind of a weird, kind of philosophical way to look at it, but I believe this is Merriam-Webster. Occupies space, possesses mass, and distinct from energy. Energy is matter, therefore, how do you have antimatter that propels the Enterprise and can cause mighty explosions?
Well, I know that there's a super collider. I think that's how it works. Like it's a.
The only thing our super colliders can do is make really good smoothies, though. Well, as far as I know, I mean, like raspberry, strawberry. It can't do peaches. It can't do peaches.
Well,
it can do.
I know that the spice is the worm and the worm is the spice. I know that's the case, but I don't know. I like matter, antimatter. I think.
Madib. My name is a killing word.
I think that like antimatter is still theoretical. It's almost like something that like we don't see matter antimatter collisions. We see their effects, but we don't actually see it happening. I think.
Well,
like
think about it. I guess maybe
like
an enormous Cadillac engine where you have internal combustion. You're mixing gas with air, and then it creates an explosion, and that's what makes our cars go. Maybe there's an engine that does that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you. I don't
know anything about cars.
What's fascinating about Star Trek is that they came up with these very simple ideas as a way to explain away certain things. So it's kind of like a MacGuffin in a way in Hitchcock.
Yeah, it's something there still is a lot of scientific theory where it's like we think that this could work.
Yes, and guess what happens, Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
We take this idea that these writers and producers made, and we make it a reality.
I know.
Look at cell phones are communicators.
Yeah. I mean, and people are still working on lightsabers.
Definitely,
trying to come up with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I read a very funny story. Some kid wrote a fan letter to Gene Roddenberry and said, "Mr. Roddenberry, I'd like one of those phasers. Please, could you send a phaser to me? Because I have a little brother who just doesn't leave me alone, and I want to use it." And Roddenberry actually he bought into the kid's idea, and he said, "We've received numerous requests for phasers. The problem is they're way too expensive to mass produce. Would you take a button instead?" And he says, "Yes, please." So that's what happened.
But sometimes you shouldn't get what you want. I don't think I want people going around with phasers. And
I think he also said at the end of his letter, "I don't think your parents would appreciate you just phasering your problems away." So we're going to have Kirk and Garrovick down there on the planet with bait, an enormous jar of blood. This blood, it comes in a big, like one of these canning things. Like it's like, remember how your grandparents would can fruit and put it down in the basement. Well, this is an enormous mason jar of blood
with a name like Fluckers.
It has to be good. It's fresh. So they go down. Jesus Christ. They go down to the planet, of course, Garrovick and Kirk, and the bait's already taken. The thing sucks up the blood and faster than you can say 24 frame dissolve. And so he's like, "Get back to the ship." And he's like, "Captain, you're not going to lure that thing itself. The only thing that thing feeds on is blood." And he's like, "Get back to the ship," and says, "Yes, sir." And then he tries to Captain Kirk chop him, and you can't Captain Kirk chop Captain Kirk. He knocks him out briefly, but then Kirk decides, "I'm going to beat the shit out of you for a second," and then he says, "Consider yourself on report."
Yeah, the only thing I missed out of these episodes is they didn't have the fighting music, the dun, 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 dun. I love that music. That came later, right?
Well, for us, it comes later.
Yeah.
This music was already out at the time because that's from the Amok Time episode of Star Trek when Spock has this little punfar. But here, the creature comes toward them, and so they energize their transporter and detonate this bomb, and it blows away half the atmosphere of the planet, which, they have some issues with that, but I understand. This thing's a killer. We get to the end, and then they Spock beams them back just in the nick of time, of course. And everybody's fine. And then apparently, Kirk wants to share some memories of Garrovick's father to him. And then we all, laugh our way into the credits. And how many people have died in this episode?
A few. Did you do a count? Did you?
I'm going to say maybe five red shirts die in
I'm
this
thinking
episode.
like a Hot Shots where they start counting all the deaths. Ding, ding, ding,
ding, ding, ding, ding. All right, any final thoughts on Obsession?
Okay. I liked it. I don't...
Sorry, whisper.
You're my obsession. You're my... That's all I thought of. I will find a way, and I will have you. I think that I liked it. I didn't like it as much as the other one. For some reason, the combination of the Shakespearean acting and the other one that we talked about, that was made it more interesting. But I also like this, again, because I laughed because it's been talking about order. That really what it comes down to, of like
sickly sweet like honey. It was like being smothered in honey.
Yes. And again, it reminded me a little bit of Star Trek First Contact. There was a little bit of that, of like the obsessed little Moby Dick in there. All right. And I think that like it was like it kind of like the title of it was perfect. He was obsessed, and it's like from his past, this vague past of like weird stuff comes out of his past all of a sudden, but none of it really fits together in a continuity. Like somebody needs to come up with a weird Kirk continuity of all these sort of bits and pieces from different shows and probably movies of his history. Because my thoughts of his history was, not to talk about the movies again, but it's that he grew up on the farm in Iowa, had some rough times, and then joined Starfleet. And that's all I can sort of, and it's like this vague, he's a farm boy, basically. he's Luke Skywalker.
Yes, yes.
And I feel like that's...
He only works in outer space.
He only works in outer space. So I think that's what I imagine. So when they have these stories of him already being in space, it kind of throws me out of it a little bit.
Oh, I wouldn't miss this for all the tea in China.
Yeah.
I love Catherine Hicks. She's adorable in that movie. Anyway. So, yeah, Kirk can be obsessive, especially when the drama hits a little too close to home. He can be vicious, even with Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy. He tends to be terrible to Chekhov, who is always telegraphed as a Kirk in training. He yells at Chekhov in obsession. He gets angry at the beginning of the Enterprise incident that we talked about last time. He even shoves Chekhov. Ridicules his particular Russian eccentricities.
I had it coming.
He's like, we've run the scan both ways, and run it 20 times if that's what it takes. Something like that.
Yeah,
Kirk,
this wasn't him being like ironically douchey. This was him just being douchey.
Yeah. He's definitely a dick, but he's a dick with a purpose. This is how I see it. Kirk is the heart of the show and the Enterprise. Spock is the mind, and McCoy is the soul. That's how I see it.
I am tired.
Let's get the hell out of here.
That'll about wrap it up for this one. Next time, we're going to discuss Paradise. And by that, I mean we're going to discuss 2 episodes with Paradise in the title, The Paradise Syndrome and This Side of Paradise, where Kirk and Spock find their own respective paradises in those episodes. They should be a lot of fun.
Nothing to do with the Phoebe Cates, Willie Ames film of the same name.
You mean the ripoff of Blue Lagoon?
Yes.
Oh, right, yeah. Almost paradise. We're knocking on heaven's door.
That's another. That's from something else.
I'm gonna have to throw that one in too. All right. For now, I am David Anderson.
No, I'm David Anderson.
No, I'm David Anderson, and you are
David Lawler.
Yes. And this was Ship to Ship, the Star Trek podcast. See you next time.
Bye.
You have been listening to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with your hosts, David Lawler and David B. Anderson. To find out more about us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit us at www.blissville.net or on Facebook at Misadventures in Blissville. Good night.